Hi. I will give a few minutes to see who wants to join. This is my first time streaming using Streamlabs, which I'm very excited about, but it's always a learning curve. So I'm still learning here. We'll see how it goes. I really want to share with you guys today my favorite books. I have so many books about horror, classic Hollywood, Universal monsters, Universal in general. I use them a lot for my research, for when I'm writing my videos. It's informed a lot of the knowledge that I have, but I also just find them really entertaining and fun. I'm always sharing them with like friends of mine, and it's a way to kind of get them to love Universal and classic horror and all that stuff as well. I also think this is the perfect time to be doing this because I know that you guys are all looking for gifts to give your friends who love film and monsters and whatnot for the holidays. And I know that you guys are probably looking to fill out your own holiday lists. So, also feel free to let me know if the sound is good, if everything's looking good. Because like I said, this is my very first time on Streamlabs, so it's all a learning process, but I'm stoked. Hi, John Klein. Hi, John. So good to see you. Thank you for your compliments. Hi, Mark. It's good to see you too. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday. Friday the 13th also. I I knew that this was coming up. I was planning for this day and then I kind of totally forgot. But again, this feels like the perfect day to be doing this. So I am going to start with a book that you guys have probably heard me talk about before, but I think this book is so good and it's probably one of the most special books to me. And that is It's Alive by Julian David Stone. Here it is. I love this book for a handful of reasons. One, so many of the books that we're going to talk about today and so many of the books that I read about old Hollywood are factual books. They're biographies. They are, sharing the history of these stories in a really academic way. And that is cool. That's amazing. That's awesome. Of course, we need to share history in that way. But this book is a fictional, like a historic fiction, a fictionalized retelling of the days leading up to the filming of Frankenstein. So this is like in the days when Universal didn't know if they were going to be casting Bela Lugosi or Boris Karloff as the lead. They bounced back and forth a lot. It talks about Carl Laemmle Sr. and Carl Laemmle Jr. and their relationship together and some of the push and pull that they had as Junior really felt that horror films were the way to go for Universal, and Carl Laemmle Sr. was like a little less certain. And so I just think that this is really fun because you get to experience all of the people, Boris, Bela, Carl Laemmle Sr., Jr., like Sidney Fox is a character in it. You get to experience all of these people as people, which is not something I usually get to do. I get to experience them as like historic figures, but I don't get to like live a day in a life with them the way that you do when reading It's Alive. So that's one of the reasons that this is my favorite book right now. I do know Julian David Stone quite well. He and I often appear at different conferences and conventions. We'll speak on panels together. I really couldn't recommend this book more. And I think that you guys should all get it, especially if you're looking for a new way to experience that history. Mark, I see your question. Do I own anything that belonged to Uncle Carl or Junior Laemmle? I mean, I have a million old letters from them, letters to each other, letters to other relatives, letters to people that they worked with or that people who they worked with sent to them. I have, what's tough is some stuff is a little bit murky. Like I'll know that it was either my great grandpa Eddie's or Carl's or Junior's or Carla Laemmle's. Like I have so much stuff, old tripods and trunks and things, but I need to find the right resource in the family to reach out to know exactly the provenance of those items. But we have so many pictures, like probably, I don't know, thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures. So a lot of stuff. I might be able to think of more things. Like I know we have this old, it's called like a loving cup, which was often given, I think, as sort of a prize or a symbol of like gratitude, but you would fill it with alcohol and pass it around and everybody would drink from it together. Which today sounds pretty gross, but I mean, I guess it's like I guess it's no worse than like a beer bong. But anyway, I have stuff like that and like so much stuff from my Aunt Carla. Um, so yeah. And sorry, Scott, that I didn't say that I was going to be live. I kind of had a little bit of extra time suddenly in my calendar this morning, unexpectedly. And so I just thought that this would be a great way to fill that time. And I think I said this last time I was streaming, like, I want to get in the habit of streaming with you guys all the time. I think this stuff is like so much fun. It's the best way to connect with all of you. So anyway, let's do our first book was It's Alive by Julian David Stone. Let's figure out what my next book is going to be. Okay, another book I recommend. This book is if you want the facts, the history, if you want to know sort of all the behind the scenes of the making of movies. This is made by my friend Tyler Mattis. It's called 100 Years of Universal Monster Movies. My cat's got to the corners here a little bit, so don't judge me for that. 100 Years of Universal Monster Movies by Tyler Mattis. I also wrote the foreword in this book. Tyler and I met years ago because he had reached out to me. He had, I think, a Universal Monster podcast, and perhaps he was even doing like a college thesis on Universal history and the monsters. He's talked about working on this on this book for years, and it just came out last year, and it really dives into 100 years of monsters. It is information dense. It's got a lot of great pictures. He is just his mind is such an encyclopedia of that classic Universal knowledge. He loves these movies and these stories more than anything. And so this book is really good if you are looking for the history and the real stories and just like the brass tacks and facts of these movies. 100 Years of Universal Monsters is a really great pick. Scott Fulps asks, were you aware of your family history while growing up? Depends on which era you're talking about. So when I was like a kid, no, not really at all. My mom had been, I think, a little bit rebellious, even though obviously my family was from LA. They'd lived out here in LA for like, I don't know, at that point, 80 years, 90 years. My mom decided that she was going to go to college in New York. And after New York, she bought a house in Connecticut. So that's where I was born. And I lived in this like small town in Connecticut all the way until I was 13. In Connecticut, I had there was like no context for the movies and like the movie business, I guess I would say. Like, obviously I watched movies, obviously I was like a consumer of these things, but it's not like I had this history and like Hollywood all around me. So I'm sure that my mom even must have said, like, my family started Universal. I'm sure that she must have told me here and there about what my family had done, but it didn't mean anything to me as a kid, right? Like, what 7-year-old or 10-year-old even really cares about that stuff? But once I was 13, that's when I moved to LA. Suddenly I had the history, the context, the movies, they were all around me. And that's when I really started to get a sense of what my family had accomplished and what it really meant. I saw Lemley Theaters that had my name on it. I had friends whose family were working in the film business and they had like kind of heard of my family. I started to even just understand the gravity. You know, I could go to Universal and see this giant studio that thousands of people were visiting every single day. And I started to realize that the Universal logo was opening all these movies that I loved. And then I started learning about Carl's other accomplishments, about winning a Supreme Court case against Thomas Edison, about inventing the movie studio tour, which obviously I was still taking out here, and about creating the concept of a movie star who I was now like suddenly I was starting to really idolize and adore movie stars, right? I started to learn all of these different things about Carl and really have a sense of what he accomplished. And I mean, obviously, I can't forget, also saved hundreds of refugees. So, like an actual hero. It wasn't until probably I was a teenager and beyond that I developed a true respect for what he had done. I wish I could say that as like a 5-year-old, I was all about it, but I wasn't. Happy holidays, KDD. Thank you for joining. Thank you everybody for joining. It's really cool to be here. I'm sharing some of my favorite books and just all the things that I love that if you guys want to pick these up, I think you should. If you want to gift them, I think they all make really great gifts. And I think this next one especially, some of these are a little dusty from my shelf, is a really great book. I absolutely adore this one. It is called Letters from Hollywood, Inside the Private World of Classic American Movie Making. This book, I think it must have come out maybe 5 years ago now. It is compiled and edited by Rocky Lang and Barbara Hall. The foreword is by Peter Bogdanovich. It is full of literally old letters. Oh, that's so weird. I didn't even mean to open to this one, but it is full of old letters written from one notable person to another notable person. So literally this page that I happen to open to, I must have just opened to this page so many times before, is a letter from William Wyler to Carl Laemmle. And I always say Wyler is a distant cousin of mine. This is specifically saying that William Wyler and Carl Laemmle were second cousins. I'm going to trust their research here on this. It will give you the background of like what the letter was about, and then you can actually see the letter here. There's Will Hayes to Warren Doan. There is Burt Glennon to Katharine Hepburn. Some of these are like, you can learn so much about people from their stationery, from their handwriting, from, you know, all the little, this looks like there's some rights and some rewrites. There's so much that you can learn about people here. Oh, here's another William Wyler. Kirk Douglas to William Wyler. There's some great pictures. This book is so great because you can just flip through pages. It's not like a story that's building over time. You can just flip to any page you want and read a letter, read about, you know, that person or what was going on in their life. It goes all the way through, pretty sure it's chronological, all the way through the 70s at least. I'm right now Jane Fonda to Fred Zinnemann, July 26th, 1976. I think that this is a really cool book. I remember years ago, I might have even made a whole video on this book because I remember loving it so much when it came out. I had some friends who came up to me afterwards who said that they got this book, they gifted this book, and everybody was saying that they thought that it was like a really amazing book. So Letters from Hollywood, Inside the Private World of Classic American Movie Making. I highly, highly recommend this. Thoughts on the Dark Universe Land coming to Epic Universe? I'm stoked. I always say that like any reference to the monsters that I love is fantastic. It sounds like, you know, they're building this into something real. I don't think they're sparing expense with it. I understand that it's not all going to be honoring like the history of the monsters the way that we want to, but I think that every honoring of the monsters is an opportunity for people to discover and then want to go back in time. If they see a new, let's say, Wolfman movie that they love, some of those people are going to say, okay, well, what other Wolfman or werewolf movies are out there? And they're going to kind of go through the lineage and end back up at our Lon Chaney Wolfman. And you've got a new monster convert, right? Same thing with the Invisible Man, same thing with the Mummy, if they can do it right. Same thing with all of the monsters. I do not think that remakes or reimaginings will drown out our monsters. I think that the good movies will always find their way to the top, and I think they can all coexist together. I think the alternative is that if we don't have these remakes or these lands or these things to connect people to the monsters, the alternative is that they ultimately die out because there's nothing pulling the monsters forward. There's no one else to keep them alive. Like It's brutal, but we're all going to die one day too. So if not us, who? And if not new movies, how? And new lands and new things. So that's a really long answer. Thank you guys so much for being here. I know this was last minute. I didn't know if anyone was going to want to join, or not even want. I knew you guys wanted to join, but I didn't know if you guys would be able to join. It's Friday. It's a work day. I didn't give you guys any heads up. So okay, next book. I would say, I don't want to typecast here. Probably this book will be more interesting to the women in your lives. But I think that everybody should read these. I shouldn't really typecast here. I have 3 books by Alicia Malone. Here we go. I got to learn how to do this. I have 3 books by Alicia Malone. I think it's really cool to hear her perspective. You guys probably know her from TCM. She has Backwards and Heels. What are the other 2? I see one. Where is it? Right here, but I didn't pull it down. Girls on Film. And somewhere I have a 3rd book by her. And I got to meet her maybe like 6 months to a year ago. She came to the LA Breakfast Club, which is this breakfast club that Carl Laemmle was once president of. It still exists today in LA. And she was a presenter one week. And that's actually where I got these books. But I think it's really cool. You know, she grew up in Australia. She was just a film fanatic from a really young age. If I remember correctly, she even started like a film club in her high school where, you know, sort of in Australia and where she grew up, people weren't interested in movies the way that she was, but she just did everything that she could to build her film knowledge, to move to LA and to really make this part of her world. And ending up at TCM, I think that is the coolest thing. And so it's really fun to hear her stories and her perspectives on film in literally all of her books. Backwards and Film, Backwards and Heels, Girls on Film. And I don't know why I can't remember what her 3rd one is, but Google it. It exists. So that's another good one. This book, I always end up going back to it. This was a gift to me. And you know, my question might be, I have no idea if this is just readily available like on Amazon, or you would have to get it somewhere else. This was a gift to me from my friend Jim, like probably 10 years ago or something. It is called In the Garden of Allah. It is a true, I'll just read the front. The Garden of Allah, the story of a crazy, uninhibited hotel where the hotel is the star and the supporting players are the famous guests, such as Robert Benchley, Dorothy Parker, John O'Hara, Greta Garbo, John Barrymore, Errol Flynn, Humphrey Bogart, and dozens more. The Garden of Allah was like a hotel or a compound that used to be, I think, I've never been exactly positive on this, but I believe it was on the southwest corner of Sunset and Crescent Heights, which until recently was like a very old shopping plaza, and they have just raised it, and I think they're about to put condos up in that spot. This actually, it has a picture of what it looked like back in the day. And basically, I mean, I guess similar to like the Chateau Marmont or the Beverly Hills Hotel. Stars used to go here. They would sort of shack up for days, weeks, months at a time. They would party. They would go crazy. All sorts of scandals would happen. Big things happened at the Garden of Allah. It's one of those places where like I wish I could sort of go back in time and just observe, just like watch everything that's going on. But this dives into a lot of the stories. Now there's probably a counter argument. Oh, and there's some pictures too. There's probably a counter argument to this book that a lot of it is rumor and a lot of it's scandal, and who knows how much of it is true, but it's a salacious read and it's pretty fun. So if you can find it, one day I will figure out how to do this. In the Garden, no, it's not even in. The Garden of Allah by Sheila Graham. Look it up, see if you can find a copy. It is fun. Okay, I'm going to go back a couple years too, and this is not horror related, but I think that this is a really great book, probably for your like middle school, high schoolers. This is such an important part of history. And given kind of our political climate right now, I actually feel like this book is a really important read and an important like part of, I don't know, historic context. So this book is called Games of Deception. It's by Andrew Moranis. I definitely talked about this in my video about the Olympic gold winning universal basketball team, which is still like a mind blowing thing to say. So, Games of Deception, Andrew Moranis, the true story of the first U.S. Olympic basketball team at the 1936 Olympics in Hitler's Germany. So, the first Olympics ever to have basketball, 1936, it was the German Olympics as Hitler was rising to power. Crazily enough, the team was about 50% comprised of Universal Studios employees. So Universal had a basketball team that would go tour around. I think they used it a little bit as like an employee outlet, but also as a promotional tool for Universal. So sometimes at games, they would have somebody dress up as the Frankenstein monster and run around like in the stands. It was just a big deal. Crazy enough, their coach or one of their coaches was Jack Pierce, the famous makeup artist. It's a story that I love particularly because we hear so much about him being like meticulous and curmudgeonly and all of these things about his process, but he clearly had like a fun side to him and this like whole other personality we don't hear as much. So anyway, he was their basketball coach. There was a whole process of like tournaments and Olympic trials that I want to say happened at like Madison Square Garden. It's been a few years since I read this book. And basically Universal was combined with a Kansas City team, I think that I want to say were called like the Oilers or the Globe somethings, because I remember thinking it was kind of perfect. So it was like Universal and something with the globes. Anyway, then they get to go to the Olympics. But this is a really contentious Olympics because, like, for one, they even have some Jewish players on their team trying to decide. I think the team in general had to decide, are we really going to the Olympics in under this regime, let's say, that is perhaps scary and controversial and who knows like what they're working toward, which now we know was like terrible stuff. But there were also Jewish players on the team trying to figure out like, if I go, am I going to be representing my Jewish community really well and showing that we're actually like bright and strong and smart and kind and all of these things that the world is not saying that we are? Or conversely, if I go, am I somehow accepting the regime and what's going on? And am I like playing into a certain type of propaganda that's going to work against my community? And I know that that was a really tough decision for them to make. I also remember reading that basketball in these Olympics ended up being a little bit of a disaster. I'm pretty sure it rained. The courts were really muddy. There wasn't a lot of experience even in like refereeing and whatnot. So there was a lot of like inconsistency in how things were being scored. But ultimately, USA and the Universal basketball team won. It's a crazy story. I think this book does a really good job of sort of breaking down what's a really big story into a really digestible format. Like I said, I think all the way down to like middle schoolers could be reading this, learning about the history. If you're interested in sports, if you're interested in history, if you're, you know, especially if you're a basketball fan, Games of Deception would be really, really good. So go pick that up. And I totally agree. They really should make a movie about the German Olympics. I think that this would be a really good time. And quite frankly, I think even the story of this Universal basketball team, sort of the origin of basketball, of them making it to the Olympics, and then, you know, sort of the again, this tension that I just talked about. I think that whole journey would make for a really good movie. Okay, I'm going to go real off topic here for a second. And I'm not going to lie, I haven't read this book. But this book, Tragic, by Robert Tannenbaum, I am the name of a character in a book in this. There is literally, I kid you not, an Antonia Carlotta. And I think the main character is Vincent Carlotta, but Antonia Carlotta is his wife. It was named after me. This was a privilege I got after meeting Robert Tannenbaum a couple times years ago. I honestly don't even remember how it came about, but all I know is Antonia Carlotta is a character in this book. I'm pretty sure the premise is a union boss is like murdered. Somebody's murdered. They got to figure out who did it. Robert Tannenbaum is a really famous, really great author. But if you're an Antonia Carlotta fan, you should buy Tragic by Robert Tannenbaum. Okay, let's go to a book. I actually did a book club on this. I'm really bad at this. A book club with this book back in like 2020. It was like the height of COVID. I was living in Colorado with my grandparents. I'm pretty sure I rented out a hotel room for one night because their internet in Colorado was so slow. And we even called an internet guy out, and he said there was nothing that they could do to make it fast enough for me to live stream. But I rented out a hotel room for one night so that I could book club with you guys in Denver, Colorado, where I was able to get faster internet. Elsa Lanchester herself, an autobiography. I had no idea going into this book for the first time. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. First off, this book was out of publication for many years, and it was the work of, I believe, Tom Bloom that got this back in publication so that we all have the honor to read this book. It has a foreword by Mara Wilson, who, of course, I will always know for Matilda, but I actually think she's really incredible. She's an activist. I've seen her sort of speak around LA a couple times. I appreciate her openness about her experience as a child actor and growing up through that, and sort of what the world means to her now because of it. But anyway, Elsa Lanchester, I had no idea what an unconventional life she had and what an interesting person she was. I think obviously the first thing we ever know about her is that she was the bride of Frankenstein. She was an actress. She was married to Charles Laughton for many years. It was what is called a lavender marriage. So he was gay. She sort of just considered herself his companion, his best friend, and they sort of made their situation work. But she grew up with very unconventional, I want to say that they were like maybe communist parents, hippies, sort of just didn't fit into societal norms. And it's funny because I think that my impression of Elsa Lanchester through her book is that she's always feeling the push and pull of like wanting to be traditional, right? Even staying with Charles Laughton, knowing that he was gay, I think in some ways was her clinging to tradition and trying to do what was right, but also, you know, the pull of the unconventional life that she grew up with was always kind of there with her. She has so many stories of just relationships, of acting. I wish that there was more about The Bride of Frankenstein and Universal in general. There's not too much, I think, because for much of her life, she was trying to escape that as being one of the main things that she was known for. But I remember really loving this book. You can also go check out, like I said, the book club stream that I did is in my live stream, so you could watch it if you want like a more complete version. And I had other people, I had Tom Bloom and I had other people in that live stream with me, so they really fill out the story of the book really well as well. Yes, she based The Bride on swans that she saw as a child. Yes, she spoke about this, I think, on a talk show in like the 60s or 70s, that she was thinking about the like the hiss of a swan when she did her hiss in The Bride of Frankenstein. It's impossible not to see once you know that, but she did it so well. And I think, I mean, it created such an iconic moment. I can't think of a better way for the bride to be represented, especially when you're thinking about her fear, her anxiety, all of these things that she must be coming alive with in this room, surrounded by people having no idea what's going on, why she's there, what is this world even. There's so much more to the Universal story than simply monsters. We do love our monster friends. Yes, I feel this push and pull all the time of the monsters. I feel so connected to them. They feel so important. They're such a big part of the Universal story. But the more that I learn, the more that I realize that they really are just one piece of the story. And there's so much more to Universal. One of the areas that I really want to start digging into, I was really inspired talking to I was just on a podcast. Actually, the podcast will come out December 23rd, I believe. But we recorded a couple days ago. It's called Amusing Jews. And one of the guys on that podcast is really into old Westerns. That's sort of his passion. Universal for a long time focused on Westerns. He talked about hearing that Carl Laemmle often saw himself as almost like a character in a Western in the wild West, and feeling such a kinship with that type of story, which I loved hearing. And that even more made me really want to dig into the history of Westerns at Universal. It's such an unexplored place for me, where I know that there is like so much to mine. And yes, I can't think of another appearance that had that much impact considering her short time on screen. I watched The Bride of Frankenstein a long time ago. I probably went a bit without watching it. I watched it again and I forgot for so long, or it was a rediscovery every time I watched, oh yeah, she's not really in this movie. Frankenstein is the lead, or the monster is the lead in The Bride of Frankenstein. She's on screen for 3, 4, 5 minutes, but she is so memorable in those minutes. She's the epitome of there are no small roles. There are only small actors. She took this much. She took no words. She took a hiss and a scream and a look and a arm, and she made it so memorable, iconic, forever. It is so, so, so good. Let me see. One of the things that I did, I went around the house and I pulled all the monster books. Oh, yes. Okay. This is for the kids in your life. This is a golden book, and it is called Monsters. We actually just picked this up at a Scholastic book fair that they were having at school. Or maybe it wasn't a Scholastic book fair, but it was a book fair that they just had at school. It was right around October. And I thought this was so cute. So it's Dracula, many monsters have terrible powers though transformations tend to make them a bit batty at times. Frankenstein's monster, the scariest step any monster can take, is the first step. So it's cute. It's inspirational. It's a lot of fun. I think I did see a question that I didn't answer earlier about if my partner and the kids are into the Universal monsters and all of that. Yes, especially I would say for the kids. My partner is, because she's so supportive of me and everything that I do, but the kids are because I'm indoctrinating them. And, they see, it happened very organically. They see how much I love the monsters. I always have different clips and pictures and videos on my computer, whether I'm editing, whether I'm researching. And so it's made them really love the monsters. They used to come home from school all the time and say, I want to watch the Wolfman. I want to watch the Creature. I want to watch Frankenstein, which warmed my heart so much. They're little kids, so it's not like they're watching the entire movie all at once in one sitting every time, but over and over and over, they're asking to watch these things. They get stoked when we're out in the world and they see one of these monsters. Even if they're not with me, they will make sure that I get a picture of it, or that they tell me about it later. They'll buy me little gifts and trinkets all the time with the monsters. So it's really cute. They get so, so, so excited about it. And we've started taking them also to different conventions, the Monster Palooza and WonderCon and all the different conventions, because I think sometimes that they see how much they love the monsters. They think it's so cool, but a lot of their friends don't really know them. And so when they get to go to these conventions and see all of these people who are so passionate about it, who are dressing up as the monsters, who've made their whole world about these monsters, it gets them really excited. So anyway, one of their books to read at night, The Universal Monsters, a Golden Book. Bye. Thank you so much for joining, Scott Fulps. Sorry, I'm not leaving. He's leaving. And I'm going to stay on the kid train for one more second and just say that for the modern horror loving kids, Goosebumps are a classic, but they're timeless. Right now, this is being used as a pencil box. She actually had the coolest pencil box in class last year because this is what she used instead of your like standard pencil box. But of course, we have all the books too. These things are a freaking hit. I was obsessed with them when I was a kid. I for sure read more Goosebumps books than I didn't. I've read at least 50, 60, 70% of the whole series at some point in my life. But the fact that kids today still love these Goosebumps books, I think is really amazing. They're like the right amount of scary. They have, great cliffhangers at the end of chapters. We do joke because almost every chapter ends with this giant cliffhanger that's really just like the mom walking in or, something totally normal. So she really started to identify the pattern of the cliffhangers and what that tempo was like, but they're really, really great. So if you are trying to like slowly pull young people in your life into that horror world and you really want them to love it, I think Goosebumps is a really good way to go. I almost knocked my phone over. Oh my God, there's so many books. Okay. I only actually do have a few more. I see it's 11:45. I'm probably going to end this around 12. So we got 15 more minutes. If you guys want to get any additional questions in, now is your chance. The next book, and I'm going to admit I have read some of this and I have not gotten all the way through, but I have loved what I've written. I am quoted briefly in it, which makes me feel extra special. But The Bride of Frankenstein, edited by Emma Westwood. Emma reached out to different experts around the world and asked them to speak on The Bride of Frankenstein. Here, Midnight Movie Monographs, Bride of Frankenstein, a collection of essays by others, edited by Emma Westwood. Writing on the legacy of one of the greatest horror movies of all time, Jess Connolly, John Towson, Sally Christie, T. Bloom. That is exactly who I was talking about with Elsa Lanchester herself. Makes perfect sense that he's in here, that they're in here. Scott Esman, who I have spoken with on a panel before. I believe Scott Esman is a Jack Pierce expert. The introduction is by Sarah Karloff. So, again, if you are a Bride of Frankenstein lover, honestly, you should consider this little twofer here. It really doesn't get better than this when you think about it. And again, I am quoted very briefly right in the front. I wonder if I should just read what my quote is. Have I ever seen the cheesy horror film? Is that the name of the film? Or the cheesy horror film? I need to know more about what you're asking with the cheesy horror film. Let's see if I can find where I'm quoted. Okay. So this is in the introduction by Emma Westwood, where she's, I think, talking about her own experience with The Bride of Frankenstein and probably what compelled her to write this book. She says, great-grandniece of Carl Laemmle and Universal historian Antonia Carlotta acknowledges Bride of Frankenstein's hallowed position within the Universal horror canon. She highlights the character of the bride herself, who she believes encapsulates both beauty and horror at the same time. Quote, she draws you in, but at any minute she could turn on you with a hiss or a scream. Some see LGBTQ subtext in the film, while others compare it to the immigrant experience, and still more see it as a rejection of gender norms and the patriarchy, says Antonia Carlotta. I always related it to my own struggles to feel loved and accepted. I believe Uncle Carl and Jr. would welcome any of these interpretations and more because it would reaffirm what I'm sure they already knew. Bride of Frankenstein endures and will continue to, not because of any specific interpretation, but because it's a story we can't help but find ourselves in. I sound pretty good in print, guys. So just for that, you guys should read this book, The Bride of Frankenstein. And I also, just for the record, if you can find these in your library, if you can find these online, I don't actually care how you guys buy these books. I just am trying to share the books that I personally love or find myself reading a lot or flipping through a lot. And this was definitely one of them. I will say one that I have just started. I want to make my way through this whole book, but it's a little bit intimidating. But I'm starting because it's somebody that I want to know more about. The Cochran brothers and the making of Universal Pictures, a name that comes up so much in the very, very early days of Universal and even before with Imp, and when Carl was working as a clothing manager at the Continental Clothing Store in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Robert H. Cochran was an advertising executive. He worked at, I think they were just called the Cochran Brothers in Chicago, and he would help the Continental Clothing Store do a lot of their advertising. When Uncle Carl leaves the Continental Clothing Store, he reaches out to Robert Cochran in Chicago. I think, for lack of a better word, well, actually, I'm not gonna swear on here because I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here. He was having his like OMG moment because he left the store. He's got a family to support, and he doesn't know what he's going to do with his life. And Robert Cochran, I believe, is one of the ones who says, listen, whatever you do, I think that you should just go into your own business. Don't work for somebody else anymore. Do your own thing, figure it out. At first, Uncle Carl thinks that he wants to like open up a series of Five and Dimes. He's like looking for locations for that. He finds his first Nickelodeon. He decides to go into theaters. He calls up Robert Cochran, and Robert invests in his company. He really believes in him and he stands behind him. Robert would become the vice president of Universal. And I think that even in 1936, when Uncle Carl sold his stake in Universal after the whole, we'll call it showboat fiasco, I'm pretty sure that Robert Cochran steps in as like temporary president until, I can't think of his name right now, but the guy from Standard Capital then, I think, took over. But so there's all of this history about Robert Cochran, his involvement in Universal. I think potentially his brothers were involved in the studio as well. And this book, oh, that's Uncle Carl right there. Look at that mustache that he had. He was like a pretty handsome guy when he was younger. I think we would have made good friends. But anyway, so it's full of old Universal history. It's full especially of the advertisements. I've been doing a lot of research recently at the Academy Museum over like the Margaret Herrick Library, which is over on Olympic and La Cienega. And so much of what I'm reading, especially the research that I'm doing, covers a lot of the time with Carl Laemmle's battle with Thomas Edison. And so much of what I'm reading is that the advertisements that they put out, all of the sort of print warfare that they did against Thomas Edison, General Flimco, and all the cartoons that they did, so much of that was spearheaded by Robert, really trying to help push, you know, that narrative of like evil Thomas Edison and bringing the independence to success, I guess is the way that I would word it. So, I mean, there's amazing pictures all the way through here. I want to read all of it, but I'm sure you can imagine that something like this is a little bit intimidating. It's a lot to read. There's only so many hours in the day. Today I had 1 hour, but I chose to be here with you guys. But maybe you guys can read this first and tell me which pages are most important that I catch first. But obviously I'm going to try to go through the whole thing. Oh, this book. This gets pulled out so much by the kids, which I love. But I mean, I love it too. It's called Romancing the Vampire from Past to Present. It is by David Scull. I have had this for, I mean, over a decade. It's one of those things, I think I must have seen it like maybe at Aunt Carla's house once upon a time and thought it looked so cool, and maybe she just let me have it. Because I don't necessarily remember buying it, and just in the last, I don't know, even 20 years of my life, I don't remember not having it. But it's a really great book about the history of vampires and vampires in movies. There are all sorts of things like fold out maps, and I'm pretty sure that there's like even letters in here. It's like really 3D stuff. Posters, pictures, everything. There is a picture of Carla really early in the book, and it's cute because the 4-year-old will find her picture and say it's Aunt Carla. Maybe she's even way at the beginning. And I, love that I just love that he's sort of connecting and learning these things. Oh yeah, here she is. There's Carla. She was such a cutie. Yeah, and I'm sure you guys can see even more stuff falling out of the book. It's such a like interactive book as far as these books go, and there's so much to it. It says Carla Lemley welcomes you to Romancing the Vampire. Lemley, who turns 100 years old in 2009, spoke the first words in the 1931 Dracula. And wouldn't you believe that she lived all the way until 2014? She was 104 years old when she passed away. So, Romancing the Vampire. If you are a vampire lover, if you love a vampire lover, get them that book. Let's see. I got 2 more books here. Oh, one you guys probably already know. I for sure talked about it in one of my videos. Yours Cruelly. Wait, let me see. Oh, Edison really did not deserve the credit he got, sadly. I believe that's so true. Sorry. And I'll get back to Elvira. His skill, more than anything, was the legal system and knowing how to use those things to his advantage. I think the way somebody said it recently was like his greatest invention was the think tank. He was hiring people around him to do a lot of brilliant things. And again, he was smart, right? I'm not saying, oh, he was like a bumbling idiot who never did anything in his life. But he would hire really smart people around him, and he would be the one that would take the credit for what came out of that. And whenever somebody tried to go against him, if he didn't like somebody, he knew that he could just bog them down in the court process, in legal fees, in all of that. He sued Carl Laemmle 289 times when Carl tried to go independent. Carl Laemmle put, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars all the way back then into fighting Thomas Edison. He was, I mean, I guess as far as independents go, he was on the bigger side, but against Thomas Edison, he was a tiny guy trying to fight this institution, and most people couldn't. They would either go out of business or they would eventually fold and kowtow to whatever Edison said just so that they could keep making a living. Carl Laemmle was one of the only that was able to figure out a way to keep fighting, but it was expensive. That's what Thomas Edison was really talented about. So, okay. Yours Cruelly, Elvira. I mean, I've always loved Elvira, and I've always thought that she was amazing, but the love that I have for her, the way that my love for her has grown since reading this book is just so crazy. I think that she One of the things that I think I appreciated most about her was it just seemed like from a young age, she was just like a yes person. Like, yes, how can I get out in the world? How can I do more things? I'll say yes to this. I'll say yes to that. You give me an opportunity. Yes, I'm in. And I think that that served her so well in life. She was in like a Fellini film in Italy. She went on a date with Robert De Niro. She has stories of meeting like Elvis Presley and I want to say Arnold Schwarzenegger and just traveling the world, dancing, acting, modeling, like you name it. She's got a story for it. And this book was just so interesting. She includes a lot of pictures as well, which is very cool so that you can like, I don't know, just get to know more of Elvira in her life. And she talks about the creation of the character. Like, I really had no idea, I don't think, when I was younger, that she was a Groundlings actress and that a lot of her skills and abilities came out of her Groundlings training. Personally, I love the Groundlings. I used to go to their Cooking with Gas show all the time. It's one of the best improv shows that I've ever been to in my entire life. And to know that she was like trained in and came up out of that world is really, really cool. This book, like I said, it just needs to be on everybody's reading list. Go out and find it. And, one of the other things that I really love about this speaks a little bit to books like It's Alive that I already said that I love. Yes, you are learning about her history, you're learning facts about a life, but the whole time that I was reading this book, it felt like I was having a conversation with Elvira. It really felt like we were sitting at the table and she was just telling me these stories, and it made it really fun to read. And the very last book that I'm just going to recommend today is Hollywood Gothic by David Skal. I find myself referencing this book all the time, specifically when I'm trying to just learn more or dig into the history of vampires. Let's see what the back of this says. The primal image of Count Dracula, the black-caped vampire, has become an indelible, an indelible fixture of the modern imagination, with a recognition factor rivaling, in its own perverse way, the familiarity of Santa Claus. Without prompting, most of us can recite Dracula's salient characteristics: sleeping by day in his coffin, rising at dusk to feed on the blood of the living, the ability to shapeshift into a bat, a wolf, or mist, and a mortal vulnerability to a wooden stake through the heart or to a shaft of sunlight. In this critically acclaimed excursion through the life of cultural icon, David J. Skal maps out the archetypal vampire's relentless trajectory from Victorian literary oddity to modern cultural commodity, digging through the populist veneer to reveal what this Prince of Darkness says about us all. I think I gotta work on my reading aloud. Anyway, it is a really, really great, again, really informative book about not just our Dracula, but kind of all Draculas. Well, first off, I didn't think that I was going to be on here for a full hour. And I definitely didn't think that I was really going to get through almost every book. I would say there's one book down there that I didn't show you that I'd pulled off the shelf. It is California in the 1950s. It just feels a little too off topic now, but if you guys want another time, I can show you. I think it's about time to wrap up. Does anybody have any good holiday plans? Do you have anybody you're holiday shopping for? I'm, of course, doing some holiday shopping for my family, for some friends. I might actually, it's funny, like now that I'm really going back through these books and remembering what I loved so much about them, I think there's a good chance that I'm going to buy a few extra copies to give out to the people in my life that I love. For anybody who wants any of these books specifically, of course, you can always look for them on Amazon. You could always shop local at your local bookstore, but I will put like my affiliate links in the bio so you can always get them then. I am so excited that I got to do this sort of surprise stream this morning, and thank you guys so much for being here. I think especially with just knowing that through StreamYard, it seems like everybody had a really good experience. For me, this was a really simple and easy experience. I also saw there's all sorts of extras that I can add in on here, banners and pop-ups and things. So I want to start building that out, and then I really want to start streaming way more often. This is so fun for me. So yes, definitely plan on more of these, but the next one will, unless it's going to be a surprise one, the next one will be in January. Are you a fan of the Mole People or This Island Earth? I haven't seen either of them. My guess, correct me if I'm wrong, is that those are probably like 50s or 60s. And I have quite a gap of a lot of movies in those years. I've seen so many movies from the 1910s, 20s, 30s. And then I've seen so many movies in the 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. My God, I'm so old now. But there's a gap of time from like the 40s to the 90s where I probably haven't seen too many more movies than that. I mean, I've seen more than the average person, but I certainly have not seen as many as the average horror lover. I'm so split in my like obsessions that there's this gap that I don't hit so much. But if you recommend them, I'll go out of my way to watch them. I might be seeing a film with my mom the week before Christmas, not a horror Universal film, I'm afraid. Well, if it's not a Universal horror film, what are you watching? I will be seeing Nosferatu, actually. Probably everybody should be seeing Nosferatu. It's funny, there's a part of me that wants to go to like one of the early screenings of it, but I also think that there's something really special about seeing a movie like sort of when it opens with the people excited to see it when it opens. There's a different energy or a different excitement. So on December 27th, I am going to see Nosferatu with one of my friends. We got tickets at, I think it's the Arrow Theater. He is so knowledgeable about like the type of film, the type of projector, the type of thing. And this is one that I think visually is supposed to be one of the best types of blah, blah, blahs. I don't say blah, blah, blahs because I don't respect it. I say blah, blah, blahs because I don't know it. But anyway, I am very, very, very excited to see Nosferatu. I think I know I did a trailer reaction and I was a little mixed sometimes on like the grayness that the aesthetic seemed, but I will say that digging into German Expressionism more in the video that I just did about German Expressionism and its traits and sort of how it lends itself to film, I think that it gave me a new appreciation for the tone or the mood that they're trying to set. I still think that perhaps there could be even more starkness or contrast in the colors versus being what to me sometimes look dull. But that also might have just been my computer. And maybe when I'm actually seeing it on a big screen in theaters, maybe it's going to be a totally different experience. So, very, very excited. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me on this surprise Zoom. I hope you guys found it really interesting. I hope at least a few of you walked away with books that you want to get, whether for yourself or your friends. Again, it's the holiday season upon us. And let me know if this was interesting. Like, I still have way more books that I didn't even pull off the shelf. I also have other just universal inspired stuff around the house, so I could do stuff like that. And of course, we can have streams where we are like watching movies together, where we're just chatting and doing Q&As. I could do streams with like questions, or after I see Nosferatu, I could do a stream where we all talk about it. Like, what do you guys want? Because for me, I'm just excited to like do this and be a part of it. But I don't know if I always know exactly the thing that like you guys want to do with me. So let me know. Okay. Have a good day. Happy holidays. Happy Friday the 13th. Bye.